Hello there, happies. Are you ready for another Singularity Podcast? Well, I am. So, why don't you grab yourself a nice hot cup of coffee, maybe stop working for just a little while, kick back a little bit, relax, and listen to my podcast. Take it easy on yourself. You know, I'm working on this new pipe choir album, and just this past week or so, I've been working on this particular song, and as I'm listening to it, working on it, I'm like, what does this song remind me of? It sounds so familiar to me, okay? And then I realized that it's the rhythm and the feel of the song is very reminiscent of this song by John Lennon called Woman, off of the Double Fantasy album, the album that he released just prior to his being murdered. And I think of this song, I think of John Lennon, I think of that album cover. I open up this file folder in my brain of all the things that are associated, at least in my mind, with John Lennon and Double Fantasy, and how old I was, what the weather was like, that time of my life, and the things that were going on around me. And it's not a big deal or anything, probably not something that's really worth talking about, but this is a podcast that's not really concerned with anything like that, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I kind of feel, I don't know if you agree, but when I hear the songs like Woman and It Feels Like Just Starting Over, there's a certain kind of sadness, I guess, that's attached to that music and to that time, probably because, he was murdered just after that album came out. And of course, I was just a little guy back in 1980. I was only, 9 years old when that song came out, when that album came out. And I didn't really understand a whole lot about John Lennon, like his politics and, his controversial statements and all those kinds of things, like the controversy and scandal around John Lennon. But I did sense from my older brothers and sisters and from what I was seeing on the television and things like that he was a relatively important person, that his death was not something that was a small matter. It was a big deal to a lot of people. And I remember seeing the footage on television of the crowds and throngs of people gathered at what is now Strawberry Fields, and they were just sobbing, they had lost this hero. And like I said, I didn't understand all the minutia of the John Lennon situation, but I did get the impression that this was a pretty important person. So now that I'm an adult, okay, and I can look back on the situation with John Lennon, and I understand the background a lot more, and obviously I'm a songwriter myself. You can't be a songwriter in the modern era and not have an understanding of the Beatles or have an opinion one way or the other, right? And if you listen to my podcast for any amount of time, I'm sure you know by now that the Beatles are, at least in my best estimation, they're not even really a band anymore. They're a standard. They're like Mozart, Beethoven, the Beatles, But I do remember the feeling of sadness, and I remember it all over again when I hear the music from that album. And it's funny how music can do that, isn't it? How when you hear a song, it can just transport you back in time to the people that were around you, what they looked like, what was going on, what you were like, how old you were, the season that it happened. Was there snow on the ground? I mean, you remember everything. At least I do. It all comes back to me. And there's that, like I said, that file folder, the John Lennon file folder, that's in my brain, and I pop it open, whenever I hear one of his songs, especially the songs off of Double Fantasy. I'm happy with this track I'm working on. It's coming along really well, a little bit better than I thought it might. And I'm kind of glad that it's reminiscent, at least to me, of John Lennon, that time when he was killed. But it also gets me to thinking, okay? I've heard the story, and I'm sure that you have by now, of, John Lennon's assassin, There's documentary after documentary about that situation and the events that took place. And I gotta say that from my best estimation, the story that we've been fed about John Lennon's assassin, Mark David Chapman, I think his name is. It's not even worth remembering. I kind of get the sense, okay, in my, truther, skeptical mentality, okay, that the story we're being fed about the death of John Lennon is not entirely true, okay? Why do I say that? Okay, because it's reported, okay, that his assassin had been hanging out in New York City, kind of like waiting for his opportunity to come so that he could, murder John Lennon. And, the reports are that while he was there, he was in this incredibly insane mental state where, he was paranoid, schizophrenic, flipping out, just flipping the script. Like, this guy was nuttier than a fruitcake. Yet, in the reports of this story and the events, leading up to the assassination of John Lennon, apparently Mark David Chapman, however crazy he was, talking to the little people in his room or something, he was inviting prostitutes in, to have sex with. That doesn't make any sense, okay? If you're schizophrenic, paranoid, flipping out, you're not going to invite some strange woman into your room, some stranger who could be potentially dangerous or violent or whatever, into your paranoid space, right? Not going to happen. It's kind of like when they make the claim that John Kennedy, the former president who was assassinated, was out shagging all these chicks while he was married, right? But it's like, if you read the history of John Kennedy, his medical history, he had severe back pain, okay? Crippling back pain from a back injury I think he received during the war. And he even had like a special rocking chair that he would sit in to help him cope with the agony that he was in, probably on a daily basis, right? Now, think about that. You got a guy who's got chronic back pain, like crippling back pain. How much boot knocking is he going to be doing? Doesn't make any sense, okay? Well, the same is with the situation with this Mark David Chapman, or whatever the heck his name is, okay? Like, it doesn't make any sense. He's paranoid, flipping out in a hotel room, and he's, knocking boots with prostitutes. I don't think so. So, honestly, if you know enough about the history of John Lennon and the situation with his deportation from New York City, out of America, and how they were trying to get him deported out of the country, and he won. He was successful. He was able to stay. He won in court. He was able to stay in the United States as a citizen. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a faction of people maybe walking around out there that, absolutely hated him. And, he won in court, but in the end, they got what they wanted. He was gone. He was removed from the equation. Is that a fact? No. It's an opinion, though. and it's one that I've kind of come to over the past 20 years or so, just thinking about it. A lot of stuff with the assassination of John Lennon that doesn't make any sense, at least to me. And I guess I can share with you really quick, I was visiting New York City back in the day when I was shopping my music to record labels in New York City. And that woman that was my liaison in New York City, took me to the Dakota building. So I got to see it, kind of stood there and kind of stared at it. No big deal really, but when you consider the history and the profound change culturally all over the world that came from those gunshots right there on that stoop that I'm staring at, Pretty fascinating stuff. Anyway, I'm going to get a sip of my coffee here. You should probably do the same. Oh, man. The best cup of coffee I have ever had. So I'm going to share another story with you. It's kind of off the beaten path a little bit of a Hodge Podge kind of episode today. But I want to talk about this very weird experience that both my wife and I had one day when we were going to the store to go shopping. Okay, so it was just a normal day. We were just going to the store to buy some clothes. Okay, so we parked the car, we get out of the car, and as we're walking from our car to the entranceway of the store, these two women kind of come from the other side of the parking lot, and they're kind of walking almost like lockstep with my wife and I, right? But what was really strange about this, and this is why I'm bringing it up, is because these women were kind of grotesque, okay? And I don't mean that in an insulting way. One of the women had blondish hair, the other woman had red hair. And they looked almost like they were twins, okay? And they had their arms around each other as they were walking, almost like propping each other up. And they were kind of hobbling, okay? Like almost like they were bound to each other, okay? And they were so odd and so bizarre that both my wife and I took notice of them, and we kind of took notice that they were walking in lockstep with us. So we kind of slowed down a little bit and let them go on ahead of us. And then we were able to kind of really get a good look at them. And they were just so strange. They just stood out. They was so strange. And they were kind of talking to each other, but really quietly, and they were, I don't know, it was just something was weird. They weren't normal. Something was wrong with these two women. Well, what was even weirder was when we went into the store, it seemed, okay, that everywhere we went in the store, we would see these ladies. We would be in an aisle looking at something, and they would come around the corner. So we would move on, go to another part of the store. Sure enough, these two ladies would pop up. Now, they weren't coming at my wife and I, okay? They were just kind of hanging around. They were just kind of there, but they were so strange. It was so weird. And we hadn't said anything to each other while we were in the store, while we were seeing these women. We just kind of were both quietly taking note of the fact that, one, they were totally weird and something was wrong, and that they seemed to be following us, or they seemed to be everywhere we went. And afterwards, in the car, we both kind of were asking ourselves the question, what was that all about? Okay, what was going on there? There was definitely something weird, and we both were kind of asking the question, were they even really there? Were we seeing something that other people couldn't see? Okay, Trust me, it was that weird. They were that. The word is grotesque. I mean, they were. Man, I don't know. They seemed to be like maybe handicapped or something, or and propping each other up. They might have been drunk, and they were constantly talking to each other. But from what I could tell, they were just kind of talking gibberish. And so I don't know. I guess they could have been really there. They could have been people. I mean, they looked like people. They weren't like transparent or something. But it's just one of those things I forget about. And then I remember it from time to time. And I thought, I'm going to talk about that in this episode. Pretty weird. Isn't that weird? Have you ever had an experience like that? We hadn't had one quite like that before. It was a little weird. Even by my standards, it was pretty damn weird. Anyway, so another thing I want to talk about today. And man, this is one I could probably devote a whole episode to. In fact, I probably will after this one. I'll probably, somewhere down the line, do a really in-depth investigation into this situation. But what I want to talk about today is this thing I found out about called the D-wave machine, the delta wave machine. And what the delta wave machine is, at least from my best understanding, is a device, a computer, a quantum computer that's been invented, built, and is now operating. And the claim with this delta wave machine is that it's really kind of like it's a way to contact other dimensions using quantum computing, quantum physics. So it's like a Ouija board, but it's a computer. And the claim is that they can actually go into other dimensions, ask questions about things, and get answers from beyond. Now, this all sounds like a Twilight Zone episode. I mean, it sounds way out there, but trust me, this is real. This thing exists. Whether it actually does what they claim, I don't know, but I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. Although I will say this, I pay a lot of attention to YouTube and that kind of stuff. I watch a lot of that stuff. And one of the things I'm constantly hearing about is artificial intelligence, right? And just how advanced, artificial intelligence is and all that. And I wouldn't say that I completely disagree with that, It's probably, real to a certain degree, But I'll tell you what, every time they show one of those robots, on YouTube or something, where they claim that this is the state-of-the-art, AI robot, there's one, I think it's called Sophia. It's so stupid. You gotta be kidding, Like every time I see that thing, like a video of it, talking about the future or some stupid thing like that, it looks like like one of those automatons from Disney World. It's not anywhere near, being human, And I hear the claim a lot that they're like really, really close, to making a robot that will surpass, human intelligence and human capability. And I don't know, this thing that they're pushing front and center as the prime example, this robot Sophia or whatever it's called, it's like, oh brother, facepalm. Are you serious? Are you serious? Like, this is the best that you have, and you're making the claim that you're just, a hair's breadth away from surpassing the human being? I don't think so. Maybe like in computing power or something they are, but when it comes to the physical, attributes of the human being, you know what? They'll probably never be able to create a robot that can move and work and operate like a human being. I'm sorry. I don't think so. Anyway, that's just my opinion. I hope you're not offended if you're one of those people who's all about the future and all that kind of thing, but I don't know, man. You can believe what you want. I'm not buying it. I think it's all kind of a little bit hokey. So back to the Delta Wave machine, this crazy machine that they're using to communicate with other dimensions. Okay, so when they say other dimensions, what exactly are we talking about here? Like, who and what are they communicating with this Delta Wave computer? Okay. I guess in case you haven't heard of it before, you can just Google it. Just like anything else these days, you just type it in. Bam, there you go. Anything you want, you can find it. One of the only great things about modern technology. Okay, so I guess there's an interview with a guy, like a seminar or something, with the guy who's like the spokesperson for this Delta Wave machine community. Okay, and he says it himself. Okay, that with this device, they are summoning the demon. Okay, he actually says it, right? That they are summoning the demon. And he says it tongue-in-cheek, right? Like it's, like they're really tapping into the evil potential, okay? But maybe he means it literally, okay? Maybe it's not meant as a figure of speech. Maybe they are actually using this machine to tap into that kind of thing. And I gotta tell you, if that's the case, okay, why would you ever want to mess around with anything like that? I just don't get it. It's like, I get the sense from these scientists that are working in like artificial intelligence, trying to bring about the singularity, the time when the computer surpasses the human being. Okay, I get the sense from these guys that they're like those nerdy, guys like in the movies where they're creating the monster like Frankenstein, and they think to themselves, I'm going to create this horror, this monster, right? But it'll do what I say. It'll answer to me, everything will be okay, and then of course, in the end, the monster runs amok, right? Kills the creator, and goes on a rampage, Well, I get the sense from these guys that it's probably something like that. Like, they think it's going to be hunky-dory. They're going to create these robots that are going to be really smart, smarter than people, but everything's going to be all right, They're going to be our friends. Get out of here. What's the matter with you? You've got to be kidding, right? I don't know. I don't have any faith in those guys, and I see the stuff that they're doing. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. It probably is, though, at least to a certain degree. They wouldn't be talking about it, or showing it if there wasn't some truth to it. I guess there's the whole fear-mongering thing that a lot of people seem to be going for these days, trying to scare you, like fear of the future, trying to make you afraid of what's coming. But just watch the Sophia video, and listen to the dialogue from these guys and make a comparison between the Sophia video and the claims of these scientists. And it's like, oh, brother, get out of here. Like I said, in my opinion, they'll probably never do it. It'll probably never happen. What do you think? You probably disagree with me. That's okay. I can handle that. It's okay to disagree. Well, that's another thing we could talk about, isn't it? The right of dissent, in the modern era. Like, we live in this time where you're hearing about it almost constantly, right? Like, YouTube creators getting their channels shut down because they're being, censored or whatever, because they're saying things that are controversial to someone, right? And they're being shut down and all that kind of stuff because they have a difference of opinion. I'll tell you what, it kind of makes me a little bit worrisome about the future. But I'll tell you another thing. It also makes me wonder about the future of something like YouTube. Like, can it really exist for very much longer if it continues to practice censorship like that? I don't know. I would imagine that if they keep going in that direction, that it would only be a matter of time before some other multi-billionaire comes up with a better idea than YouTube, and they just eclipse everything that YouTube has done. It could happen. That could happen. I think we live in a time where that kind of thing is possible. As unimaginable as it might be to a lot of people that something like YouTube is big and is widely used and as popular and important, socially important as YouTube, could go the way of the dodo bird, It is, like I was saying in that last episode about, Enron and capitalism and regulation and deregulation, that is the natural course of capitalism. Kind of like I hate to admit it, okay, but kind of a Darwin-esque aspect to capitalism, where it's the survival of the fittest. And I gotta say, in my opinion, that if YouTube continues down this path of censorship, whatever's going on, oh man, I think it's just a matter of time. People will stop tuning in, and they'll go somewhere else, and I don't think it's going to be something like Vivo or something like that. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a platform that doesn't exist yet. But like I said, some rich, smart dude somewhere, probably at MIT, like down the road from where I live, will come up with something that will eclipse YouTube. And wow, can you imagine? Can you imagine that happening? Maybe it'll be an open source form of YouTube, something like that, where there are no restraints, there is no limit. I don't know, could be. Anyway, so lately where I live, okay, the area that I live, there's been this controversy that's popped up, and it's really strange. Okay, it has to do with graffiti being written on bathroom walls in schools in the area that I live. And basically what's happening is they're finding these swastikas being written on bathroom walls. And, because of the current climate that we live in, whenever a swastika pops up in a bathroom, it's all of a sudden like a news story. Like it's this big hate crime that someone drew a swastika on a bathroom wall. Now, I get that, okay? I get that, at least to a certain degree. But I think a lot of people are being reactionary. They're overreacting to this, okay? Because I'll tell you what, ever since I was a little kid, we're talking kindergarten, okay? 5 years old. There was stuff getting written on the bathroom walls like forever, there'd be a penis, this huge penis drawn on the wall with a Sharpie, and it says like "eat dick" or something like that. It'd be like that kind of stuff, and even things like swastikas and crosses, symbols, and stuff like that. And it wasn't a hate crime. It wasn't anything serious. It was some stupid kid with a Sharpie, like being stupid. That's all it is. That's all it is. But now there's this wave, and I'll call it that. It's a wave of these swastikas, these hate symbols, popping up in bathrooms all over Massachusetts, apparently. Okay? And I'll tell you what. I'm going to tell you what I think. Okay? I think that it's not kids drawing those swastikas on the bathroom walls. I think it's probably adults that are doing it because they know it'll be a news story, right? And it works towards this agenda, let's say, this political objective that a certain faction of people are aiming for, right? It wouldn't surprise me at all if we find out in the future that there were these agent provocateurs, that were operating inside of school buildings even, teachers or whatever, that are going into the bathroom with a Sharpie, they draw a swastika on the wall, and then they call it in to the news, and they say, hey, there's a hate crime happening here in our school. I'm probably not the only person who thinks that way, but I'm probably one of the only people who really, see it that way. And I can live with that. That's okay. I don't know for sure. I never claim to know anything for sure. But it's just opinions, right? It's only opinions. That's all it is. Even if somebody draws a swastika on a wall, it's an opinion or something. It's not a news story. It shouldn't be, but for some reason it is, Which reminds me, now that I'm thinking about it, there was a situation here in Massachusetts about maybe a year ago, maybe over a year ago now. I think it was not this past winter we're coming out of, but maybe last winter. There were a bunch of homes in the Massachusetts area that had a gas leak problem, okay? And their houses either exploded or the gas leaks were so bad that the people had to evacuate their homes, okay? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because today, okay, to this day, that problem has still not really been resolved. The people who were having issues with their heat over a year ago, the problem is still there. It hasn't been resolved. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine? What excuse could there possibly be to allow any household in modern America to go for a solid year with a gas leak that never gets fixed, never gets remedied, a year later? Are you kidding me? You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. And that's the case. It's true. It's true. We know a couple of families. My wife and I know a couple of families that are still dealing with this problem. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? What excuse could there possibly be? I don't know. I just can't think of one. I just can't think of one that's reasonable. Think about that. It's pretty crazy. That can happen in modern America. A modern city. That kind of stuff can still go on. Like, what? What? So that's about all I'm going to say for today. Got to get back to work. It was great talking to you. I hope that you have a good week. I'll talk to you next week. And with that, this is Mike Bostwick from Pipewire Records signing off. And remember, folks, if you want to keep what you've got to give it away. Take it easy.